I guess I must be.
Yeah, you're ready. We're just
I'm
ready. We
ready.
we just go when we go. You know, the
Is that how this
starts.
works? We're just
It's just
going.
we just go as it goes. There's no like, massive. Well, there's an intro on our audio version, which is
Hmm.
amazing. The intro and the audio is amazing. But for video, we just show up. That's what we do. We show up
Is
here.
that we just
So
show up? Yeah, no, 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 I think that's good.
yeah, we just show up.
And hi.
Hi,
Hi,
world.
everybody.
Hello. So this is episode 2 of What's Good in the World, and episode 1 I think was really awesome, and a lot of people saying, "Wow, we really need this right now." So that was nice.
I needed it, that's for sure. It was great, and it was great to hear the feedback. Just people seem to also appreciate that focus on things that are positive and joyful, which I, I figure, while we're a sample set of 2, we're probably not alone. Uh,
No, no, definitely not alone, but our own take on it.
yeah, exactly.
Fantastic.
I
So what do
Okay,
you
I'm
got
trying to
for
think.
us, Aicila? What's your first positive news
Um,
story?
my first positive one, I don't know if I should go for um the big. I'll go for the big one.
Okay, let's go big.
I'm gonna go for the bigger one. Going on my theme, but I don't want anyone to feel like they have a sense of what I'm gonna come up with, because that always gets them into trouble. But the theme so far around environmental stuff, I don't know if you heard about it, but we agreed to, the US and the EU agreed for the first time to create a fund at the COP27, which is a climate summit essentially for the world, to pay for the losses that some countries have due to climate change. And the reason that I see that as a positive thing, I mean, it's probably evident, but just that there has been a lot of unintended consequences. I'll be, and so there are countries that are facing the impact of climate change that contributed little to nothing to the actual cause. And so for these 2 wealthy countries, or entities, the US and the EU, to recognize that and then provide some support to the countries that have been impacted, to me, there's some hope around that, not just for that, obviously that's a good one, but also just maybe some more global awareness of our interconnectedness and the ways in which what we do here does have an impact. And a lot of times the way that we talk about it is kind of individualistic and a little shaming, right? Like, you need to recycle more, and really you're not the problem.
Right.
It's much larger. And so for these larger entities to actually take on some accountability, I just feel like that, hopefully that's a indicator of a change in terms of people recognizing we're interconnected, we have global impacts, and accountability isn't scary or bad. Like, that's one of the things that I find really perplexing in life, is that people will go to immense effort to avoid accountability, much more effort than they would have to go to if they were able to sit with the discomfort of recognizing their impact and then taking on some kind of action to address it. So there's a lot for me in that's positive, as well as the immediate positivity of, maybe some of these countries their suffering will be alleviated with actual support, as opposed to, yeah, you're fine, which seems to be how we've dealt with it for a long time.
Yeah, this I've heard of this, and it's interesting. It's a big conversation about kind of the global South and places where there's just extreme poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to a really good podcasts with Lex Fridman, and these 2 kind of, one guy's kind of a climate alarmist, another guy's journalist. It was like 4 hours. I did not listen to all 4 hours, but I listened to like 2 hours. I got
Mm-hmm.
in like 2 hours while I was traveling, and it was a lot about what you're talking about, with that, the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility of developed nations, um, and what you would call, rich nations, to help out poorer nations, because it's very difficult for nations in the global South to really just pick themselves up and create these better options. Because really, it's whether we move electric and all these things, the gas powered cars are going to be sold in the global South, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's going to create more pollution. It's a big cycle. the whole thing with
Yeah.
it. So, we point is we got to help people. And we've experienced that same difficulty in the United States with underrepresented populations, essentially like, well, why don't you just do better? Well, it's not that simple.
Mm-mm.
And we're facing the same thing with climate change, I think, with certain places. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
That step is being taken.
Yeah. Well, and what you're talking about too, is one of my favorite soapboxes, which is the concept of enlightened self-interest, which is
Yes.
to say, instead of saying like this just supports me, like I think taxes for schools are a good example of that. Like even if you
Yeah.
don't have children, you pay for that because in if you have in the whole concept of enlightened self-interest is that you want an educated population.
Correct.
Although there's, that and so that like means that even if I don't have children, I would contribute to taxes that would educate them and other types of things. Like, and to me, that feels like an important concept maybe to reclaim. Like, of course we want everybody to do well and have their individual experiences, but we also want them to be thinking about the impact and the reality that like if there's, if we run out of water, nobody gets to drink water anymore or whatever it
Right.
is. Like, so maybe we should find a balance. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting. And it's also like, I think there has to be a mechanism of help, but then the mechanism also can't feel so big that people just give up on it because they go,
mm-hmm,
the problem's too big, whatever. It's
mm-hmm,
this kind of inertia that humans have, in addition to avoiding accountability, which when you said that, I was like, wow, I love the way you said that. It's like we'll scratch and claw to do everything but that part
mm-hmm.
of it. And that's a very innate thing with humans, and small things and large things.
I mean,
For
I've
sure.
done it. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody else.
How
Like, I
dare
mean,
you say these things?
right. Like I 100% have had those experiences where I realize like, oh, I have been putting way too much effort into like trying to look good or trying to
Yeah.
convince myself that my behavior wasn't problematic for whatever reason. And it's I mean, it's very uncomfortable to look yourself in the face and be like, wow, I'm not showing up the way I thought I was or wanted to. That's a really painful experience. And it's way less work. So if you're lazy, I suggest accountability.
I suggest accountability. How about that accountability thing? I'm going to suggest that.
Like, I'm just saying, if you want to
Yeah,
do less work, go for accountability.
that's right. It's what a fantastic thing that's happened. I mean, I hope to hear more good news in that light, because I think it's pretty well known that at this point, there's not a huge amount of denial that there are things changing in our climate. And
Mm-hmm.
there used to be a huge amount of pushback on that, but I think there's just so much out there and data and stuff. It's very difficult to deny that something's going on. And
Yeah.
and also it just also shines a light back on poverty and less fortunate, and how it many times it is the responsibility of well people or well-to-do people to help out and for us to help each other. We are a part of the same species here. I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
on the same planet. There's nothing else out there at this
Mm-hmm.
point, you know. So we should take care of each other and our only home, that, in all honesty, is what we're going to have for a very long time. Continue
Yeah.
to.
And it's beautiful. I just drove out to see my dad, and he lives in southern Utah. And the drive is so gorgeous.
Yeah,
And also it's such a stark red country.
yeah,
And I think about the like the people that came here from other countries or came here from the east when they were first kind of like forging out into places they had never been,
yeah,
which is something I don't know that we as modern people can really understand because so much has already been like revealed. But what would
yes,
that have been like to go from that green forested area to this stark, you know, red, almost no trees? Like, what an amazing discovery that must have been, and powerful. And just driving through it, because you've told you I've aphantasia, like I don't remember what things look like. So every time I see it, it's like it's brand new.
mm,
And I'm like, oh
yeah.
wow, right, this is
Well, it
amazing.
could be a benefit to that.
Oh
like,
yeah, no, aphantasia has a lot of benefits. Not knowing about it is the major lack. We'll talk about it at
right,
some point, I'm sure. But
sure, most
but anyway, tell
definitely.
me your first story.
All right, my first one, I think this is pretty interesting. So, the world's first trial of lab grown blood could revolutionize transfusion. So,
Ooh.
Millions of people have just basically been introduced to the first injected lab created blood.
Hmm.
So, donation to blood, eventually in the future, you may not need to donate your blood for other causes. And this will also decrease reactions and different issues that come with donation with blood, things of that nature. So, it is very small sample size. Only 2 people have received lab grown red cells from blood that was created in the lab. There's been no side effects so far. Clearly, that's an extremely small sample size. But the fact that it's possible is
Mm-hmm.
really amazing for
Yeah.
that. It just reminds me of how much humans are able to do when we put ourselves in the direction of helping other people, much like you were talking about with the climate
Yeah.
aspect in medical and health and wellness. There's a lot of things happening like this. Different in the same article, they talked about different technology to help deaf and hard of hearing people to like these glasses that are like AR based glasses for that.
Huh.
It's like all these different technologies that we're not hearing about. But a
Right.
lot of amazing stuff is happening in the world, literally lab grown blood. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this is mind blowing, you know?
That's awesome. I have to say, like, I have, a friend of mine is a vegetarian
Mm-hmm.
for because they identify as a pacifist, right?
Okay.
And so we have a lot of interesting conversations about that. And I was like, well, would you eat, lab grown meat?
Yeah.
And the answer isn't really important. But it's interesting because like I know it's fine, but I wouldn't say I have a fear of it, but maybe it is a fear. I'm just like, what's like I think I have that lizard superstition thing going on where I'm
Mm.
just like, that is so cool. And I'm glad they're doing it. And I know they make synthetic things all the time that I really like, but I don't know. Like, I mean, I, I don't even have like a point per se, just this feeling of like that inner conflict of like, that is
Mm.
so cool and it's exciting and it would make such a difference, right? Because synthetic blood would not be exposed to the same environmental concerns,
Right.
such as diseases or things in the blood that weren't expected,
Right.
right? So it would be much safer and easier to acquire and to make sure you have exactly what you need. And then so I'm like, that's awesome. And then this other part of me is like, but I don't even have like a good, there's nothing that follows it. It's just superstition, I think.
Mm. Right.
I don't know. Like, I don't know if you've ever had those moments of feeling that like awareness of your own superstitions, but
Yeah. There's something there. It's like maybe some hesitation or something that maybe is hard to define what
Mhm,
that is. Like the lab grown meat thing is interesting. I follow this very closely.
mhm,
And I've been a meat eater my whole life, but I feel like I'm very close to being what you call a vegetarian at this point. And I would say like I've become more ethical based as we've gone on. And I feel like I told my wife that not long ago. I was like, I can see in 10 years I won't be eating meat. I mean, I can just feel it.
mm,
It's like, and I think that we're catching up to this idea because I told a friend of mine when we were on this podcast one time, he's like, what do you think humans are going to regret like 200 years from now? I'm like, factory farming for sure,
mhm.
most definitely. Like we're going to be
Yes,
like, what were those idiots up to back then,
right?
but it's amazing the things that we can create.
Mhm.
And it's almost like it's limitless almost, these ideas come to fruition. It's like, what else can we do? I just never even thought about that idea of like lab grown blood. This was not
Yeah.
even a concept to me until I read it.
Mhm. Right? And that's it's the there's so many possibilities, so many innovations, and there's so many people out there trying to do things. And, most of them are going to fail or go into
Right.
obscurity because it's kind of how it works. Most of my ideas don't work out the way I want them
Yeah.
to. And that's fine. That's all. I think that's part of why there's honestly like a reward. You have a dopamine reward system that works on also being wrong. Like essentially you get the most dopamine for being right half the time. I feel like there's some evolutionary like incentive to experiment or seek the unknown, because that's where the new options come from, is
Yeah.
somebody trying things, and you have to try a lot of things before you find the thing that works. You know.
Yeah. I feel this way kind of like with social robotics, that I feel like it's a really just burgeoning field. I'm so fascinated by it, but I'm kind of like, well, what is my hang up about robots, or like having a robot in the future, or the ethics behind it? But then again, we all have robots in our homes, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, what's the kind of the cliff when it becomes more of a social aspect
Mm-hmm.
of it, and like what rights do robots have and things. These are like questions we're going to grapple with in the future, probably far beyond when I'm alive. I'm gone, but I think we're headed towards this future of infinite possibilities, of incredible innovation.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm surprised though when I hear about things like this lab grown blood, because I'm just like, why didn't I think this was a thing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, when somebody tells you something, you're like, duh. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
didn't I think about that?
What is, I'm guessing, and we have links for all these things or references.
Yeah,
They'll
we're gonna
be in the
have links
notes
for all of
just
it.
for
Yeah.
those of you that are listening. But I'm curious what the difference between synthetic blood and lab grown blood is.
Yeah.
Like, probably they start with cells. I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't go
But
deeply into it, but I was like,
mhm,
wow, this is pretty like mind blowing.
mhm. Well, and just think about that, like, in terms of, as you said, maybe it's a small sample size, have to do a larger one to move forward. But in terms of things like emergency places in, areas where accessing blood for patients might be more difficult or time consuming, there's a lot of people that could potentially be saved or less damaged if that was available without having to go through the process of harvesting it, which sounds weird to say.
I know, right? Yeah, we're harvesting your blood. Like, it's
So
amazing. It's
that
truly
is
amazing.
awesome.
It
I
is
like that.
awesome. Yeah, I was like really stunned by that, and I was like, I'll be sharing that today on
Hmm.
here. So, but that's cool. So, what do you have next for us?
So my other one's a little so yeah, it starts with a low note, but it has a high note
Okay.
to the
All
end of
right.
it, which is that we are aware, it's been objectively assessed, that our country, America, USA, whatever we want to call it, has a loneliness problem. And there's been a rise in suicides and suicidal thoughts amongst all ages, specifically also children. And that was before the pandemic. We were already going up there. And one of the solutions that this article talks about is libraries. Libraries can unite a lonely, divided nation. The time has come for a great reknitting, which I already just love that title, across America. The country's most egalitarian institutions, its public libraries, are a crucial place to start. And so this person's talking about a solution as a place for, recognizing that libraries and librarians are often crucial pieces of social infrastructure and access, and they're everywhere. I don't know, in Canada, when the pandemic first started, the libraries like got together to disseminate local food, because they're like, we already know how to sort and organize things, and we're everywhere. Because that's what librarians do.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
And they usually have a lot of services, and they're frequently visited by people from across the spectrum in terms of ideologies, racial and ethnic backgrounds, as well as socioeconomic status. I don't know. So I liked that somebody was actually acknowledging the crisis with a suggestion of a way to kind of support something that would bring about some community. And I also liked to just talk. I love libraries. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, going to the library was the greatest of freedoms. I could go wander and find every single book I ever wanted. And when I was a kid, you could take like 30 out, and I did.
Wow.
Like, I was a voracious reader. And I don't know, I just like that, they're still here performing that opportunity to open yourself up to a whole new world. So,
What's interesting about libraries? I think I'm the opposite of you on this. Like,
uh-huh.
I've never been a voracious reader
Okay.
of anything. Like, I'm like a big, like, I don't know. I've been to many libraries in my life. I think they're amazing. Actually, they're amazing places. I always think of like Ghostbusters when I go into a library, and I'm like thinking that like I'm in
That's
the
fair.
stacks, I'm down in some weird place. I always think of like being in college and going to the library and the kind of the hum of the lights and the peacefulness of the late nights
Mhm.
and kind of this almost a sanctuary. The
Mhm.
reading part was not my thing.
Not for you.
It was
No,
like-
that's fair.
the reading part was not a thing, but it was like, it's kind of a nice, quiet place to be. And but I do think it has tremendous value. And I think libraries are strange places in that as we've gone through technological innovation, we go from like books to like electronic books, but then there's like this big thing of people wanting actual books
Mhm.
as well. So it's like one of the things where like it moved forward in technology, but people always want to pull it back to books, like regular. And I think that's a positive thing,
Mhm.
actually. So I think it's a great thing that libraries are serving such an important aspect in society with loneliness. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and they can, like this guy was saying, we get to, because I don't know about your local politics, but I feel like every single year or every time I go out to vote, I have to say, yes, please keep funding the library and the programs.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I
They
don't know
have that
why
here.
this is up for debate.
Yeah.
People, let's actually do more of that because and so I think that, he was talking about it as a way to invest in this. He calls it the great reknitting, which I really think that that kind of mentality of like, how do we find ways to be together and around each other and come
Mm.
together on things we agree on, or even just things we both want. Like I used to go to the library when my kids were little for the little story hour so that they could, hear someone read a story that wasn't me, frankly. you
Right.
know,
Right.
and say, and a story that I might not have picked out. That's a way that you can give your kids access to different kinds of information is let someone else select the material. Um, and so, yeah, so I just, and there are always new things there to see. And they always have like the books up and everything. So, I mean, we'll see, but it was a moment of like, oh, okay, somebody's talking about how we have this problem. And then they're also making a suggestion for here's a way that we could work together to create opportunities that are ubiquitous across the country.
Yeah.
Most communities have at least one library.
For
So
sure.
that's my call to action is invest in your library and visit it.
Invest in
There you go.
libraries. I visit. I have been to the library many times. I'm just not reading there or checking out books. It's like, what are you
Yeah.
doing there? Right.
No, I used to actually, that
Quiet.
was my, before they had co-working spaces, that was my co-working space was I would
Yeah.
go hang out at the library to work. Because I've often worked by myself. So it was always nice to go be there, even if I wasn't doing anything else, just to be around people and to
Yeah.
be in a different environment that didn't have dishes I needed to clean. Just,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I would say the last significant time I spent at the library, I was 29. And I spent like hours there. I'm 44 right now. But
okay.
it's because I was finishing my doctorate. This was at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And I
Mm.
was literally finishing just the final edits to my dissertation. And I
Hmm.
was in there literally all day. And then I was printing it out. And I remember crying because I was so happy I was done with that damn dissertation. And I
So
walked out of
just,
the library and I was like, see you later, library, for a long time. Like,
that's fair. They may not be for everybody. So.
I like him, but I have this memory of that. I was like, but I wanted to ask you something before we move on. Is I just started thinking about this loneliness thing, and you talked about before pandemic. Why are people so lonely?
I mean, there are a lot of theories. I I personally I think it's a lot of different things coming together that have created that, but there's there's a lot of social distance, if you will, and there has been for a while, and a lot of fear I think people have of even like it can come from a good place. Like I know a lot of people who, if you listen to them talk, acquaintances as well as closer friends, ultimately they're afraid of like upsetting people by saying the wrong kinds of things or getting
Hmm.
judged for how they do their life or So I think there's just a lot of fear that people are grappling with. We aren't as good at disagreeing as we could be. Like, and I personally believe that with all the best intentions, we made some choices in our public education. Like we removed a lot of the soft skills education because it was biblical stories. So those character lessons that kids would get got replaced with nothing because people were like, oh, you can't have religious homilies in a school, which is, reasonable at the separation of church and state. But instead of replacing it with character stories about how, community and how to engage, that kind of stuff, we just have nothing. And so, and that I think that, and I don't know, I read an article, it was really interesting. They said it takes about 250 hours to make a friend, or
Wow.
300 when you're an adult. And think about how you get 300 hours with someone as an adult.
Well, okay, wait a minute. This is a great line of thing. We got to continue this here. This is excellent. 300 hours as an
to
adult.
make a friend. Yeah. How do you get that as an adult?
How does
as a
that
kid,
happen?
you go to a sleepaway camp, and by the end of the camp, you've gotten your 200 hours. Like,
how do you do that in real life? I mean,
it's interesting, right? I think that's where things like social clubs or interest-based clubs, like, if you go down to the same, knitting group every Wednesday, or gyms, I think, like, you maybe go work out with some friends regularly. And after a couple of years of an hour a week, you're like, maybe we'll go out for a soda or a beer. And then you do that for a couple of years. And so 5 years later, you have a friend.
It's interesting. I'm really dissecting this now. I'm going to because listen, you and I are here doing this bi-weekly show. We've become friends. How did that happen? Right? It's like, now there's been no in-person connection. Right? So I think it proves, well, it's at least observationally here, it's awesome to be in person with people, but I don't think it's like necessary to create a friendship. There's different versions of friendship. And it is like in our current online age, if we have the opportunity to have, let's say, like these conversations. Or we text with people, we call people, we have lots of opportunities to actually develop relationships. Are people not doing that? Or are they? I'm trying to figure this out. And like,
well, I do think there are different kinds of hanging out too. Like that's where they were, like, so we've done, in this, like, we've done a lot of those deeper conversations. And so I think that that's a different type of engagement, but it is awkward. Like, to start there with a lot of folks. Like, we had a context for it, the show and stuff like that. And I'm just that person. Like, I'm not great at small talk. Post pandemic, my first social engagement, I was just trying to talk, and finally I was like I never was good at small talk, and I've completely lost it. I apologize. I'm not trying to be rude here. I just don't know what to talk about with people anymore. Like, it's either really deep or I don't know what to say. And so, like, you have to be able to live in that middle ground. Like, it's important, but I do think that, like, those deeper or those more like involved engagements probably affect it. But they were just saying, as an average for people, a lot of it is time, which is why a lot of people have like work friends, right? Like, they have people, because like you said, like, even though and it's weird, right? Because they're in person, they may not be engaging, but they're in the office for 40 hours a week. Over time, there's enough of whatever it is that they start to feel an openness to a connection. But I'll do one more of my wonky academic things, which is there's this article that was talking about a discovery. I want to say Mesopotamia. I'll find the article and share it. Put it in here. But they were talking about how they had found this basically party building built like a couple thousand years ago. And the guy who that wrote the article also tended to research religious things. And he said that as you become older, you become more wary because you've had some experiences in life that show you can't really trust everyone. When you're little, you tend to trust the people in your world. they've primarily been vetted, right? And that's what your option is.
Yeah.
As you get older, you become more guarded. And alcohol and religion, in his article, he's kind of served the same purpose, where they help people to lower their inhibitions enough to make friends.
Right.
As a and so that's why social drinking, as opposed to like drinking alone, has a different impact, because social drinking tends to help people connect and to make friends, or social intoxication, if you will. And then similarly, religion and that community of shared
Yeah.
values, or the belief of that, is this another place that lowers those inhibitions. And my guess is probably working together in certain environments. Obviously you might not feel, but anything that kind of lets you let someone in so that you can actually build a friendship is probably part of it. And the other option is time, 250 to 300 hours. Like, we all
This
have
is
that.
great. I mean, this is like, I'm like completely into this line of conversation. Like, there's something about it that's really interesting to me. It's kind of, because then all of a sudden you're telling me this, and then my mind went to this other far off place about, well, what happens when the communication is one way and you believe that that person is friends with you because you've just been listening to them for a long time. With that, so like, let's say a podcast is an interesting way to feel like you're closer to someone, even if you're not. If you have a favorite thing, a person you listen to over and over again, let's say you put in hundreds of hours of listening to this podcast, whatever it is, you start feeling like there's something there. Even if the other person's never said a word back to you.
Right. Well, that's actually so I don't know if you've heard the term parasocial relationships.
Yes.
Though they've actually come to understand that those types of relationships, they're not bad. They get a lot of bad press because they frequently get noticed when the listener person, gets a little more fixated than is appropriate. So when they get out of balance, but parasocial relationships can actually serve, and they found, especially the pandemic, like a really important psychological function, as especially if people are more isolated, even if it's due to like a work thing, right, where like maybe they mostly work nights, and so the only like consistent engagement they might get is their morning, their drive home, radio hour. And listening to those people helps them to feel that sense of connection to community and to the world they're in, and also that consistent, stable engagement that gives you a sense of time and all those kinds of things. So parasocial relationships are actually really, they're an intriguing field of study, as far as I can tell. And they provide a really big benefit, but they aren't a friendship, because, as you noted, they're one-sided.
They're one-sided.
If you don't know that person, you cannot be friends with them. You can have an opening to that, you could be willing to, but until you actually have the opportunity to engage, get to know each other, it's all fiction. So.
And that's just fascinating to me. But I think like a lot of friendship is just, it's a lot of time and contact. However, how that contact happens, it can be variable. It's like when I do like a series with someone, that's my way of saying, I want to develop a friendship with you. Like, I want to have contact time over and, a certain version of it. And then, as you and I have like texted offline and stuff about different things, like it starts cementing it. Like, and I think it's not necessarily a magical concept. It's just like, you have to like want to do these things, and you have to like, and there's a rejection factor. You feel like if you say, I want to do this thing with you, and the person goes, yeah, I don't think so. Like, oh, was I thinking about that the right way? Or did I misjudge the situation? But I love that amount of time sounds daunting to someone who struggles. If a person struggles with creating friendship, it may sound like, wow, 300. I'm not going to spend 300 hours taking care of my house. It's like,
right. No, I know. Well, and I've always actually made friends pretty easily. I don't know if that's actually true. My mom
you don't know.
Well, let's be fair. I think it's a skill I developed because my mom moved all the time. And so I was in a new school every other year. And so I just learned how to get to know people and engage with them in a way that was, I guess, inviting. I also do really like people, and I get very curious about them. And I think that, that gives more of an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
But I've definitely had periods of time where I've been lonely, because even being able to make friends doesn't mean you can always are able to get to see them. Or,
Right.
when my kids were little, there'd be weeks where, we'd when my daughter had H1N1 one year, and that was a lonely 2 weeks. I couldn't have anyone
Yeah.
over. It's like,
Yeah.
so it's not, but but when I read that 300 hours thing, I was like, oh, that actually tracks with my closer friendships as an
Hmm.
adult. That, like, if I look at it, it was a few years of
Yeah.
seeing them regularly in a low pressure environment, right? Like, we were
Yes.
part of the same interest group or business group or something. And then we slowly recognize, like, oh, we might have more to talk about than knitting,
Yeah.
or, business or whatever. And then developed more of a personal exchange, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I was
Love
like, no,
that.
I think that actually does work, but it takes time. Like,
And time, the thing that people don't like, oh, time, this is going to take time. I'm
mhm,
like,
right. But it's
wow.
like that old thing about, like, I want to learn Chinese, but it's going to take me 3 years. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, okay, but what are you going to do in those 3 years if you don't learn Chinese?
Right. You're not going to
You
learn
know,
it.
you
I mean,
might as well start it now.
exactly. So
Then
true.
you'll be closer to that 3 years. Like,
Most definitely. So true. What a wait. That was awesome to bring that up. That was really cool. All right, we're gonna go to outer space next
are we
for
ready for
mine
outer
here.
space?
We're going
All
for
right,
outer
let's wrap it
space.
up in outer space.
Big fan of outer space. Have always been my entire life. But I've been fascinated since last December 2021 with the James Webb Telescope.
Those pictures are
Uh,
amazing.
they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, just fantastic. So I learned like everything you could learn about the James Webb Telescope, how many failure functions there could have been in the blast off, like 365 things had to go right for to do it. But we're starting to get the first chemical compositions of planets
Hmm.
now, which we could not get, really detailed compositions of exoplanets before.
Hmm.
My big nerdness is coming out hard
That's
right now.
awesome.
Like,
Okay.
and what we're finding out is just some very interesting things in sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, all these different elements and atmospheres. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. The point of me saying this is that we're just starting this brand new launch into understanding planets on a deeper level that are not our own planets for that. And
Hmm.
it's both thrilling and daunting and scary at the same time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much out there in space that is so mysterious and so amazing. I just think it's a great story of the triumph of humanity. Again, that we could create something like the James Webb Telescope, which is like 2 or 3 football fields, and is just out there at the Lagrange point two. And it and everything for it to actually be out there is a tremendous feat of human ingenuity and exploration. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
getting, as you saw, those pictures, the pictures that you see, they're just mind blowing. The
Mm-hmm.
cosmos is so beautiful and violent, and the struggle
Hmm.
is it's just mind blowing. So we're getting some great readings of exoplanets, and I think we're going to continue to get more things as we continue to peer into the vastness of the universe.
I love how you said that.
Of
I
course.
have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you know what inspired your love of space?
I think a lot of movies initially.
Mm-hmm.
Like I saw the movie Space Camp when I was growing up, and I really
Okay.
loved that movie. And then I think my dad has just always been into space, and I
Mm.
just think there's something so mysterious about the universe, and
Mm-hmm.
but also kind of like we're just never gonna know everything.
Mm.
And I subscribe to that in a lot of things in my life. It's okay if I don't know that something like the exact, calculation or that this is totally true. Like I'm okay with that. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up into this idea that like, all right, we have to know the exact mechanism of how something works. Listen, I don't know how my phone works. I literally don't know. Does
Right.
anybody know how electricity works? Like literally, people just they turn a switch up and on. They don't know what happens.
Right.
Like, well, you just,
No, it's true.
do you? I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
like Can any of your friends be like, how does the electricity in your house work? Like,
I have a couple of super geeky friends who probably can, but in general, I would say,
mostly no,
not so
right?
much,
Like,
right?
how does your
Yeah.
phone work? How does, it's like most people have no clue. And like, I'm okay with that. I don't need to know. In spaces like that, it's fun that we're finding out stuff, but I'm okay that it's so mysterious. But
Yeah.
I just think it says a lot about what we've been able to accomplish as a species. That, I mean, we're doing some incredible things, and that telescope is one gigantic leap in our understanding of the universe, which we probably will never know everything about. It's almost
Hmm.
impossible. It's impossible.
Yeah. No, I agree. Those, I actually almost thought about talking about that uh telescope as well.
Yeah.
And but I was like, I have too many sciencey things. I have to get something else. I have it too sciencey.
Yeah.
But it's same thing. Like it's inspiring
It's
that
inspiring.
there's this and the willingness to acknowledge that we will never know, I think is
Yeah.
also really important. Um I I I have a personal theory that the ability to access answers, and let's be clear, I love my smartphone and my Google, like I am in no way against these things. And I thought about 20 years ago, if I didn't know the answer to something, I just had to not know until I could either find
Right.
someone I trusted or a library,
Libraries.
right? And those were my options. And now I can be having conversation with you and stop the conversation to go look up this unimportant detail
Right.
because I don't want to tolerate that unknowing, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I was like, I think being comfortable with not knowing, to circle back, like I'm going to do this, call back to the beginning, can
Hmm.
help with that loneliness because it's okay not to know. And it's okay just to be there with a person and not know things together.
Yeah.
Like it's fine.
It's totally fine. I mean, think about it. Your time on this planet is very small.
Hmm.
It's such a tiny blip in the cosmos. I'm going space again.
I love
It's
it. I
like,
love it. Look at that. Yep.
and you're just not going to know a whole bunch. I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions that are going to happen in your life. So why not just enjoy people in your life and enjoy learning about as much as you can about things? But the absolutes, there may not be an absolute answer
There are
to
no
everything.
absolute answers. I'm
There's
kidding.
no, but enjoy the things that give you
Yeah.
pleasure, that are good, and give you community and connection. But the cosmos to me is, it's literally, I can see why, the final frontier. It's like,
Hmm.
man, there's nothing final about it. You're not going to get a final answer about it. I mean, it's a beautiful, violent struggle happening out there. The
Yeah.
cosmos is dangerous, but it's also so beautiful at the same time. It's kind of like humans,
Yeah.
it's like, it's very similar.
Yeah. No, it's really beautiful. I
Yeah. And
agree with that.
those pictures are like, those pictures are so inspiring. People need inspiration, it's
Mm.
like more than ever, it's good to have things that you feel inspired by. And it's great when it's a person, but sometimes just an image can be just so inspiring. And when
Yeah.
I think about that, and I think about, when they point that camera towards a piece of space that's the size of my finger, and there are billions of galaxies in my finger,
Yeah.
and that's overwhelming to me. It's emotional to me, and
Yeah.
so it's
No, that
daunting.
makes sense.
Yeah.
No, it is. It's so much. And it is. And like what you're saying, I think that is so important to have the chance to acknowledge the things that create wonder for us.
Mm,
Like in that very original sense of the word, it is wonderful and awesome. And
yes.
like feel that. We've become a little, I think, saturated with awesome to the point where maybe we don't take a moment to recognize like this is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you said that. That was incredible.
That
How,
makes
yeah, I like breaking down wonder for wonder and awe. Like, when's the last someone told you, heard someone go, "Oh, I was just in awe of this thing that I saw, and the wonder, and the majesty." These are
yeah.
often not how we use these words in today's world as much. But man, there's I've seen some incredible things like that in my life on this planet, and certainly pictures of things off of our planet. And
Yeah.
hopefully this show is trying to be part of that, which is, let's let's drink in the wonder of people and the news and things that are really good that's happening in our world.
Yeah, because there's a lot, and
It's a
that's
lot.
there's a lot, and the reality is that we all have our daily struggles, and we all have the larger struggles that we participate in, and we all have people that we care about who are dealing with things that are varying degrees of challenging, difficult, or awful. And it's not to say those things aren't real or important. Like, I see that in the world around me, and I will also say, mostly the people that I've known that have been through the worst of things, frequently they are the ones who will stop in awe, because they are frequently connected to how important it is to savor those moments as well. And those aren't the ones that often just come to us. They can. Sometimes we have to seek them out. But yeah, and thank you for being willing to take that on with me. And thanks you for whoever's listening. And I hope that you find something that inspires awe or wonder in you today. Check out those pictures, and you would definitely have a high likelihood of that, because they are pretty great.
I mean, I could understand why the scientists, when they saw the first pictures from the Webb telescope, that they started crying, and they were so moved by, obviously they're very passionate about the work they're doing. But this is why we're in awe of paintings. When somebody creates an amazing piece of art, it moves you. It makes you feel something. And space has always done that for me. I don't know what it is. It's just the vastness of it, the incredible, the small, the way it makes me feel small in comparison to everything. I think it's important to have those feelings in life. So it's an honor to like see pictures. I'm like, wow, this is like crazy. Humans made this machine that took this picture of something that happened 13 billion years ago. I mean, the telescope is essentially time travel.
Yeah, like, that's pretty cool, huh?
That's mind blowing. Like, literally, you're seeing the light from something 13 billion years ago. It's essentially the same thing that happens with our sun. You're not seeing the sun, the light from the sun as it happens. You're seeing it minutes later, or that. That's like nerdy, amazing science, right there. It's like,
Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, like that. Awesome.
Awesome. That's what we're saying. Awesome. Okay.
Awesome.
Aicila, this is always, I'm so glad we're doing this. I really am.
Me too. Thank you for taking the opportunity with me. And I can't wait to hear what your good news is for episode 3. That's always, I will say, it was kind of fun to be like, all right, like, I've been too sciencey. I want to do something fun.
Yeah. It's fun they say that's part of the whole thing, is like thinking about focusing on something good. Like, what do I want to present? And that, I think, is part of the whole beauty of this journey, is like focusing your attention on good things. And that's what we hope when you listen, that you're focusing your attention on good things. There's just so much out there. That's good.
And let us know what you come up with. We're both findable. We're very, I'm very curious what other folks find as well.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you, Aicila. Appreciate it.
Thank you.